Hi, I'm Stuart Blount, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to this seminar during Elim Leadership Summit 2021. During the last few years, our journey as a movement has seen us begin to promote more clearly the priorities that we have. We believe our focus needs to be on making disciples, developing leaders, growing and planting churches, and reaching nations so that we can truly make an impact in our generation. My privilege is to bring some degree of leadership to the priority of developing leaders across Elim. The American leader and preacher Craig Groeschel has said, most leaders are trying to figure out the right strategy. The best leaders are obsessed with empowering the right people. It's challenging to think about how we are intentionally developing leaders across all aspects of the ministry and mission of our local churches. Many of us who have the privilege of serving in church leadership can look back to those who spotted the potential in our lives and were intentional about the way in which they not only created opportunities for us to learn, but to get involved and grow. I'm so grateful when I think back to my own journey for the pastor who saw me as a struggling 16-year-old and began to disciple my life. He gave me opportunities to serve in my church. He then encouraged me to seek training at Elim Bible College. His investment in me over a couple of years set the course for a lifetime of leadership, and I'll forever be grateful for the input he gave to me. As leaders, we're called to do more than just to lead. We're called to raise up leaders, to equip God's people for the work of the ministry. Any simple examination of the ministry of Jesus reveals that Jesus poured his life into 12 men, along with many other men and women who were dedicated followers of his, to prepare them for the leadership of the church. The impact of those few years upon their lives is seen throughout the history of the Christian church. And so we face the challenge and the responsibility in our day to seek to raise leaders and to develop people to continue to this journey of Christian leadership. Of course, it's very easy to talk about how important developing leaders is, but it's much more difficult to find the ways in which we do that. Every church is different. Some are larger than others. Some have more resources than others. Some have more people willing to serve than others do. And what we want to do today is to explore some of the ways churches have developed leaders and how you could be inspired to intentionally look to discover, develop, and deploy more people into leadership opportunities. We're not just talking about people who might go on to apply to the Elim ministry, but more importantly, the countless men and women in our churches who give their time voluntarily and sacrificially to lead and serve. These people are the heartbeat of our churches. They're the people who lead small groups and youth groups, missional outreaches and alpha courses. They serve on worship teams, welcome teams, or maintaining the church facilities. Their leadership makes a difference on a day-by-day basis in every local church. To help us explore this priority, I've invited 4 Elim leaders to join me in a conversation today that you can listen into and hopefully learn from. Our hope is that you will hear in this session some of the simple yet intentional ways in which we can focus more specifically on preparing people to serve and lead. My guests today include Duncan Clark, who leads our church in Coventry and has been a member of Elim's national leadership team for 7 years. Along with Duncan, we have Shireen Agbalusi, who is the assistant pastor at Coventry Elim and part of the national Aspire team. And we also have Paula Easton with us, who serves on the staff team at Birmingham City Church, overseeing the management of the church's finances, amongst other key leadership roles in the church. And my final guest is Andy Hancock, who is the next-gen pastor at Life Central Church in Hales Owen. Andy leads the Equip program, which gives young people the opportunity of an internship at Life Central Church. And Andy's also in the final stages of an application to the Elim ministry. So, join us in our conversation about developing leaders in the local church. Hi there, folks. Good to see you. Great to be part of this conversation today. Thank you ever so much for getting involved and helping us today. And obviously we're just going to have a chat really about trying to explore what leadership development looks like in local church context. You know, across our movement, thousands of people who give their time and their energy into the life of the movement. And it's an area for years now I've been passionate about, and some of the greatest thrills I've had and joy in ministry have been actually just getting involved in developing people. And I have specifically invited you folk because I know that that's not just your heart but your journey, and help us share that story today. So that's something we want to do. And I thought one of the first places we can begin our kind of conversations thinking about how do you identify potential in people, because there may be a lot of leaders who are watching in and wondering, well, you know, what am I looking for? And just Andy, want to get started with us today. What do you think, you know, are the keys to actually discovering the potential in people when it comes to leadership and involvement in the life of the church?
I mean, I think that's the big question, isn't it, that everyone's here to get answered. I think for me, it's looking for the things that you can't teach people. And, you know, for me, like somebody said to me a couple of years ago, like, don't just look for the cool kids. Like, the cool, talented people in church life will be in high demand. They'll be in high demand in and out of church. Look for the people who've got the heart, who've got the passion, who are committed, because you can teach them what you need to teach them, but actually what you can't teach them is already within them. So for me, I'm looking for people who are like consistent, who are, you know, investing in people naturally, you know, looking for those kind of people, not just looking for the cool and talented people. And I think that's a really important thing to do, because the cool and talented people will jump out at you anyway. They'll emerge really easy to find. It's the people who will go deep, who will be consistent, who will serve long term. Like they're the people who you want to get on board.
What qualities, Shireen, do you think you'd be looking for, you know, in trying to develop people? Would they be similar to Andy? Would you see there's other things that maybe we need to be looking for in people?
Yeah, I think Andy was right when he touched on people you can teach. I think being teachable is really important, and somebody who not only is willing to learn from, you know, someone senior to them, but they're willing to learn from their peers or learn from people that they're serving with. They're willing to learn from people that are older and younger than them, willing to learn from men and women. Those are the kind of people that are most teachable because their eyes are open. And I guess also people that are willing to take on feedback. You know, they're curious, they want to be better and learn and grow and develop and all of those things. I think those are the kind of qualities to look for, like you said, not in the ones that just jump out at you, but in the quieter people as well, the ones that sometimes go below the surface. But I think it's really important that we're looking for people who are servant-hearted, because you need to be a good team player before you can lead a team. So the people that are willing to, you know, be humble enough to sweep the floor and stack chairs and clean the toilet when it's needed, all of that sort of thing, I think if you find those qualities in people, they make better leaders, because they're not going to ask people to do things that they're not prepared to do themselves. And a growth mindset, like not the kind of people that want things to always stay the same and this is how we've always done it, but to be willing to adapt and to change and to move, and have that mindset that actually it's not about standing still, it's about being on the move and developing and growing.
I love the fact you talked about stacking chairs, because when I was in church leadership and developing leaders, my elders of the day used to say to me, you know, you've always talked about the fact you're looking for the people who are stacking the chairs after the service. And I think it was that very thing, is kind of what will people be doing to demonstrate their servant heart. Don, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing you mentioned that, because I look back to when I was about 17 or 18, and across at Derby, Elim, as it was called in those days, and my youth pastor was a guy called Steve Kempton, who you probably know as like a missionary and also as like a local church pastor. And he definitely noticed me doing those things, like, and you mentioned it, Sheree, like stacking the chairs, sweeping the floor. And I was like, at the time, I was working for a bank. I'd just come out of A-levels, working for NatWest Bank, and just serving the church, serving the youth work, to be honest. And I think he might have noticed something in me in terms of like servant-heartedness. and maybe just like a development in learning to lead. I'm naturally more of a quiet person than an extrovert, and yet he would give me some opportunities to lead. He called me onto like a youth team. He gave me opportunity to lead some meetings, occasionally to give like a devotion or a talk. And he just must have noticed something in me, but it was definitely that spark. And I feel like I probably do what I do today because he noticed something in me when I was like 17 or 18 years of age. So it's a long time ago, and I've got a bit more grey hair than I did when I was 18. But he definitely noticed that, and it definitely started with like sweeping the floor, stacking the chairs.
And some great practical examples in what all three of you have said about that maybe folks haven't really thought about in terms of spotting potential. I wanted to ask you, Paola, about the importance of diversity. It'd be not lost on anybody watching us that we reflect quite a diversity in terms of leadership in Elim, and that's a really important thing for us today. How important do you think diversity is when we're looking to develop leaders? And I'm not just thinking of gender or age or ethnicity. It's a whole group of things, isn't it, in people?
It's absolutely crucial because we are so diverse. That is the way that we have been created by God, to be different. One body, many parts for a reason. And so just looking at BCC, where I'm from, as an example, we have over 90 nationalities. And you can imagine all the different cultural differences in those nationalities. Some I can easily relate to, some I can't. I just don't understand at all. As you said, Stuart, the diversity is not just about the culture or the country you were born in or the religious background that you may have had, but personal differences. You mentioned being an introvert, so am I, but there are extroverts out there. There are people.
There's a few of us around, aren't
there are a few.
Thanks.
So we all have different ways of learning, different ways of taking in information, different styles and preferences. And I feel that one size just doesn't fit all. And if we try to make it work that way, we are doing ourselves a disservice in church, because we are so much more efficient and expressive in all that we do and effective in ministry if we embrace all of those parts together. When I came to sort of the call of ministry just 8 or 9 years ago, I didn't realise at the time that I had such a mindset that was narrow-minded. Because when God asked me to step out into ministry, I immediately began to disqualify myself because I didn't fit the mindset that I thought I needed to have. I wasn't a man. I am white, and I am middle-aged, but I wasn't a man, because that was the only example that I'd ever seen in ministry. And so, God, you must have got this wrong. And I've had to learn, no, God hasn't got it wrong, and God will call many different people, because I can do something in a way that you can't, and you can do something in a way that I can't, but together we become such a powerful, effective force in ministry.
That's really important, and as you say, we're talking about the body of Christ, and we've gone on a journey as a movement. Thankfully, that's a continuing journey, and it's really important, I think, that we're intentional about such things.
Stuart, can I just add into that? I think it's really important that somebody coming to any of our churches for the first time, sees people on the platform and goes, I fit here. That's how I fit. And I think for the members of our church to be able to see diversity in our leadership and go, oh, I can serve here too. And it's not just I fit, but I can contribute as well. And I think it's so important, isn't it?
Sharina, in terms of that question, diversity, for some people it ends up being accidental because the church and our Elim movement, as Duncan will attest over our journey, we are so wonderfully diverse compared to what I can remember. How intentional do you think it's right that we be about that, not just allow that to be accidental?
Yeah, I think it's important that we're intentional about it, because we naturally gravitate to people who are like us. Maybe it's people that look like us, or have the same interests and that sort of thing. So if we always gravitate to people who are like us, the tendency can be is that the teams that we form, the leaders that we call, are similar to who we are. But it's about being intentional about looking at people's differences and seeing the strengths in that, when we come together. It can happen accidentally, but I think it's really important that we are all intentional about, like you said, looking for, that's what we're talking about, looking for leaders, and that can come across the board.
I think intentionality is important, isn't it? Because it speaks into the things that we strategically decide to do. And I'm coming back to you because I know that you were part of an emerging leaders program that Duncan pioneered in the Coventry Church, and it's great to see that you're this wonderful fruit this end of it. But how important do you think those kind of programs or those activities, the intentional things that we do, are when it comes to developing leaders?
They're crucial. For me, that looking back now, it was such a huge part of my journey. And I think more so because I was invited onto Emerging Leaders. I didn't see myself as a leader. As you do, sometimes you want to go on a leadership course and develop yourself, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there are people who were like me that I didn't see myself that way. So to have somebody else call that out, say, you know, I look at you and I see something in you that I want to invest my time in helping you develop and cultivate. That was really important for me, because I thought to myself, if somebody else can see it in me and they want to invest in me, I need to invest in myself. And I think it does something inside someone. I can attest to that. When you say, I can see something in you, let's journey this together. It's really important.
Yeah, and I was started an emerging leaders group, the church I was pastoring time many years ago. And I know the benefit for me and how I'm thrilled I was to spend time with people. And you obviously give leadership to that, and you pioneered that. From your perspective as a lead pastor, what's the value of being that intentional, being in the life of the church?
Yeah, I mean, it's made a massive change to us. I think as we look back now, it's probably about 9-10 years since like Shireen and her husband Shopi joined Emerging Leaders. I think you were probably like the first cohort. The plan was that I and just a few of our eldership would choose 12 people from within our church who we just could see like the hand of God in them, either to lead in the local church or lead in the marketplace, and to invite them to be part of that group. And the only condition was that they had to be younger than me. So at the time, I guess I was in my mid-30s, really easy now. But yeah, that was the only condition. And we met together every month, and we talked together, we prayed together, we studied like a book together. And actually now, as we look in our church and like those who've taken on various different leadership responsibilities, both in the church and outside the church, many of those have been part of the Emerging Leaders group that we had. And we started, but Shopi and Shireen are like good examples of that right from the start. But it was very intentional. Yeah. And we gathered together at the start of a year and said, who are the 12 people? Because we felt like it was a Jesus thing. But I didn't want to just do it like myself, because it sounded like almost like I got a Messiah complex. But we had a few.
We're really glad to know you're not the Messiah, Duncan.
we know that.
You
it's
are
probably quite clear.
DC.
And it just worked. And I think like we just invested in that year in, year out, and it was great for the
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. That's important. And Paola, you represent a kind of that important group of people in church life. You've not got ministry credential, you're not ordained. And this conversation has been very intentionally designed to not focus just on, for my responsibilities in Elim as director of ministry, how do we get more people into our ministry? Because actually a lot of what you do in the life of the church at BCC is not necessarily up front, you are sometimes on stage. Do you think we need to be as intentional about the message we give out? It's not all about the on-stage, on-platform ministries, that actually the majority of leadership opportunities in church will be less visible.
Absolutely. The majority of church life happens outside of the Sunday experience. I've come from a background of, I've been a Christian since I was 6 years old. And when I was 11, my family and a few other families were instrumental in a church plant. So all of the things that happen for a church plant, knocking on doors, putting leaflets through letterboxes, watching my dad as one of the pastors, having counselling sessions, having prayer meetings, organising what happens behind the scenes that people would just have no idea about for the Sunday experience. And I've also unfortunately seen quite a lot of, not so much now, but maybe 10, 20 years ago, the celebrity status of ministry, where the pastors became the untouchables. You will serve me, I will have my entourage. And it couldn't be anything further from God's heart.
Yeah.
And so I think it's absolutely crucial that we don't start to recultivate that within our emerging leaders, that they understand the hard work that goes in behind the scenes, that people make up the church. People are messy.
Yeah.
We have all sorts of things that we have to deal with, and highs and lows and everything in between. And we have to factor that in and teach them and equip them for that.
Yeah.
That they don't despise that their motivation is not to be the centre of attention and I'm the one on the platform all the time. Because that is a very dangerous part to get to, where we see ministers fall for all sorts of reasons. And ultimately, you referred to this earlier, Shireen, the servant heart. We have to be servant leaders and lead by example in how we example to those people in our congregations. This is what we do and why we do it, because you matter to me. Your life is important to me and God, and we want to serve you the best way that we know how to.
And that's a great way of understanding what leadership development is about. It is about intentionality and programs, but it's actually just a replication of the people that we are. I mean, that's how Jesus did it, isn't it? And I wanted to ask Andy to talk a little bit about the Equip programme at Life Central Church, because, I mean, as being part of the church, you've just seen the blessing and the benefit of it from a bit more of a distance. Could you talk to us a little bit about how good that's been, and maybe just give us a little bit of insight into the behind-the-scenes picture of running an intern programme?
Yeah, about 5-6 years ago, we felt as a leadership, God say, you need to invest in the next generation of leaders. And so part of that is we set up a gap year programme, and the whole leaning of Equip is not about what you can do for us, come and stack the chairs for us and come and, do all these things that we need you to do so that we can do more. It's about actually, what can we do for you? What opportunities can we do? What can we pass on? What doors can we open? What training can we offer you? And so we launched that 5 or 6 years ago, and we've seen around about 15 to 20 young adults come through that programme in that time, and it's been amazing. It has added to the capacity of what we as the collective do, but it's added to the workload of the staff members, because it takes time and energy to invest. But I think for us it's about intentional training. So we offer weekly training and training at the start of the year. It's about a timely specific feedback. So all of our gap years have a monthly one-to-one with a line manager where they're able to process stuff. We give them a mentor who's not on the staff team, so that the guys who I line manage, they can go and say, Andy's doing my head in. And they can go, yeah, he does all of our head in.
Do you realise how often they do that, though, Andy?
All the time.
Yeah, I'm sure.
aware of it, but
I decided that I really wanted to do a gap year this year, and kind of the main thing that I really wanted to gain from that was experience within the field that I wanted to go into. But because of COVID and everything that happened last year, I wasn't really sure kind of what I could do, and that kind of put me in a bit of a difficult position. But I've been coming to Life Central for my whole life, and I knew about the gap year programme that was going on, and actually I'm so glad that I did it now.
I chose to do the Equip Gap Year programme with Life Central Church because I was looking to get more invested in a local church and also develop more as part of a worship team, and especially during COVID I wanted to get involved more in a church and with live streams and within the community. And especially last year I was moving around quite a lot and I just wanted to get settled in somewhere. So I came and joined Life Central, and just looking at the Equip programme, it just checked all the boxes.
I've had so many opportunities this year. I've been a part of so many live streams, so much filming and editing videos, especially around Christmas and Easter. I think we've filmed over 100 worship videos, so it's been so great to be a part of some of those. I've also been a part of a lot of kind of meetings with the staff, which has been really, really interesting just to see kind of how things run and how things are planned.
Some of the opportunities I've had have been joining the worship and production team. When I first joined, I knew nothing about cameras or how to run a live stream. And so I've really built my practical skills within that. I've also had opportunities to lead a small group within my youth group, and some of them have also joined the production team, so I've really been able to share that experience with them.
Before this year, I wouldn't have really called myself a leader or even kind of thought to see myself in a leadership role at all. But it's definitely been a quality that I've really seen myself grow in over the last few months. We've all been leading kind of small groups on Zoom with our young people, and that's been so exciting to kind of not only be a part of, but to see all of us as well grow together through that, because that can be quite a challenging thing sometimes.
I've also had the opportunity to be invested in by people within the church, and especially make friends within a Connect group. I think one of the most important lessons I've learned is that leadership works so much better when you're not just getting a job done, but you're focusing on building relationships with people and connecting better with them and journeying with them. I feel like I've really developed in my relationship with God. I just feel I've been encouraged to take my faith more seriously since being here. I read my Bible and I pray so much more, and I just feel I've fallen in love with God more since being here. Sometimes now I ask the question of just what right now is more important, and I feel that as God is changing something on the inside of me, it's making an effect on some of the actions I take now and some of the ways I talk to people and just how I react to people, and I definitely trust God so much more now.
I've definitely grown a lot in my relationship with God this year. I think kind of simply just being around church a lot more and just being in the building with people. It's been really, really encouraging to kind of just see people, and actually it's really helped me as well. I've definitely read my Bible a lot more this year. And so say if I've got like a video to edit or a talk, that's me developing my skills, but it's also me kind of watching and listening to a talk, and I still find myself taking things away from that, and having God speak to me through things like that as much as I would normally watching a Sunday service.
Want to just create opportunities. So we don't say, here's our program, like it or lump it. We tailor make a timetable for each student that's on the program into the things that they want to grow and develop in, but we also add in things that they don't necessarily want to do. And it's been a real challenge in the last year with COVID. Our guys have had phenomenal attitudes. They've cleaned the toilets, they've wiped down chairs after services, they've done all of the non-sexy ministry stuff because it's all been offline and stuff, and I think it's really invested in them a real servant heart, which is what we've been talking about. But we've changed the timetables about once a month this year with restrictions changing, because we want it to be bespoke and relevant to them. And so any student that comes on, we say, where do you want to grow? Where do you see God leading you? Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? And let's invest and give you opportunity.
I think that's a big thing about leadership development, I think, isn't it? It's about setting them up for life. Often we think about the benefit for the local church, and the great joy for me is to be able to see people I've had the privilege of investing and supporting, doing stuff, and not always in the church. And you've been on a long ministry journey as well, Duncan. For you, has it been as much about what the people become as what they actually bring to our environment in local church?
Yeah, we've had a similar, probably less formal internship program in Coventry, and probably for the last 10, 12 years, we've had like maybe 2 interns every year. Sometimes it's been a little bit more than that. But yeah, we kind of have that balance of like trying to think, how are we investing in the person and how are they investing in the local church? And we've really seen like some great benefit out of that. We've had some great guys and girls who've developed, and a number of them are on our church staff now, who've come through that process. And not all of them by any means, but we've got some great guys and girls around us who've done that. But it's definitely been the 2 things working in tandem, because we do say to them, like, we'd love you to invest in the church, and often to do things that they wouldn't normally do. So often it's been like some younger guys who've like served in our like older folks ministry or led worship on that, and which has been quite kind of interesting. But we've also said, like, we want to see you grow and give you opportunity for you, like your heart to change and your character to grow and to see your capacity grow. All those kind of things is really important for us.
And I think that we have to be honest and reflect, don't we, that we're all part of larger church, well-resourced settings, and the reality is that's not the case for lots of, not just our Elim churches, but lots of churches across the country. And there may well be some church leaders who are enthused listening to our conversation about the kind of things that you're doing. I thought we might just dig in for a little while to some specific little bits of how can we help that. And Paula, you know, you work as a key part of a staff team with pastors around you. What would you, from your vantage point in church life, what bit of advice would you give to maybe a local church pastor about the whole importance or what they can do in leadership development?
I think they have to come to an understanding that they can't do everything themselves, and they're not equipped for that.
Yeah.
That's not God's intention for any of us to do everything. But I totally understand why that happens and why I've seen it so much, particularly in a small church setting where you don't have all the volunteers and you don't have the staff people to do things for you. And sometimes it's about the pastor or the minister thinking, I have such a weight on my shoulders, the responsibility of carrying this ministry and doing well in this setting. Sometimes it's about them just simply not wanting to let go. Sometimes it's about them not having the right people around them with the skill set. Sometimes it can be that they don't realise that they're holding on to something. But they have to be intentional to prevent this burnout that can happen, that the plan is in place, that they can say, okay, I need help in this area, and I'm going to intentionally look for somebody who can help me in this. Now, God has a unique gift of placing people where we need them at the right time. And sometimes we give this impression that we don't need people's help in serving in church. So as a pastor, take a look at what is already before you. Make sure that you're open to allowing somebody space to have a go. They may not do it perfectly first time. You may have to invest in them. Or the opposite can happen as well. They may do it better than you.
That's the frightening thought.
Don't be threatened by that. Because God is going to bring people to you for a purpose that can make this part of the ministry excel in a way that you can't. And that is a good thing. So that you can excel in the thing that God has put within you. So don't be put off by that. Be open and release yourself from this burden that often I see them carrying of, I have to do everything. You don't. It might be for just a small season. You know, I said we were instrumental in planting a church. We had to do everything, but it was very, very short-lived. For a season, it's not sustainable. So plan to bring something in that can help you for the long term in that journey.
Really good.
How do we create those nitty-gritty opportunities? You know, I mean, you know, Paula's talking about using people, and she's absolutely right. And we both led smaller churches and larger churches, and so I reflect back in my own journey when Amanda and I were in High Wycombe and did feel the pressure of got to do everything. How do we help create opportunities? What are some of the obstacles? What are some of the opportunities?
Yeah, I loved what you were saying, because I think I remember a time where I had to learn how to say, I don't know what to do. And I think like most leaders want to always be able to say, like,
you feel like
I
a
know
failure
what to do.
otherwise, don't you? You know?
I remember one occasion where we were having like a refit of the church toilets, and the guy who was overseeing it wanted some input as to what locks we should use on the toilet doors. And because I was the senior pastor, he came to ask my advice. And
that's the reason why you went into ministry.
Exactly. I spent 3 years at like Bible college to understand.
Your locks or
door.
mortis. I mean, what else is there?
But because I didn't have the courage to say, I don't know what to do, I made a decision on the church toilet locks. And the reality is the weeks and months after that, there were people getting locked in the toilet. Like small children could not undo the toilet doors. And it was like, oh man. And every time I heard the story, it was like, I felt bad and guilty about, like, I should have just said, I don't know what to do, ask someone better than me. And I think it does take that kind of courage and confidence just to say, look, it's okay to say, I don't know what to do. And to look for people, like going back to your original question, look for people who have like specific, like calling or ability or capacity, or just like the servant-heartedness to do it. But like, sometimes we just have to say there's someone better to do this than me.
Hi, my name is Roberto Roiolo, and I am a leader at Coventry Elim. My day job is working for the Home Office in the commercial team, looking after police, ambulance and fire communication system. But I have been involved and leading the small groups ministry, Coventry Elim, for a number of years. My role involves discussing with the church leadership the strategy and direction of the ministry and selecting new leaders, training them, supporting them, sometimes even challenging them, and then promoting the ministry in church and placing people into groups as they want to join. I love the role because it's where I can really see transformation of people from just fan of Jesus into followers of Jesus, and also where people that maybe use Jesus as a coping mechanism for life can actually find the promise from Jesus of living a life to the full. In Acts 2, Luke says that disciples devoted themselves to life together, and that's what I believe small groups are about. And the challenging part for me is really finding the time myself to dedicate to do a good job, is finding good leaders that are committed and don't just want to build their own friendship group, but wants to build a church, and then being able to find the right place for every member. In terms of vision for the groups, the vision is that everybody in our church can find the right place for them, where they can feel safe and grow together. So it's growth in number. I would love to have probably at least 2/3 of the people in the church that find a place in a group. Is grow spiritually. I would like everybody to be able to never plateau and always become a little bit more like Jesus, and also growth for the leaders to really form the backbone of the church. And I think after all, the groups are fundamental for the church and are fundamental for people. A guy called Robert Putnam from the University of Harvard said that people who are socially disconnected are between 2 and 5 times more likely to die of all causes. And that match individuals that are connected and live life together with others. So basically our motto in our church is join a life groups and you will live longer.
It's actually that bit like Paul was saying about it's okay to say I'm not good at everything.
Yeah.
Andy, I know you're really passionate about raising up young leaders. What one bit of advice would you give to somebody who's listening to our conversation saying, I would love to do that? I mean, you've a lot of experience now in this. What's the one bit of advice you'd pass on?
I would say you can have control or you can have growth, but you can't have both.
Wow.
And so to release control, but that doesn't mean abdication. Like leadership development isn't you go lead the youth, I'm not doing it anymore, see you later. That's abdication. For me, it's like the process should be that I'll do and you watch. We'll do it together, and then you do and I'll watch and I'll give you feedback. And I think that's a really simple way that you can do that. That's the way that we run our gap years. Is the first year they watch, they get involved, but they watch, then they lead alongside, and then we release them to lead some things, and we give them feedback. And you can do that in any area of development, whether it's young people, middle-aged people, or old people. Say, hey, look, why don't you come alongside me, watch how I do it, then we'll do it together, and then you do it and I'll watch you and I'll let you know any bits. And then like that's growth. And I think it's really important. We have to let go of control, but there's got to be some controls along the path of development. And so not having to make all the decisions and decide what the toilet doors are, letting go of some of those things, but saying, hey, here's your parameters of authority, and you know, this is the authority that you've got to spend. Go and spend it, and I'll be alongside you in there to cheer you on.
Do you think people grow better, Andy, in an environment where they know there's room to fail?
Absolutely.
Not every failure is fatal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, as somebody who develops leaders and invests in our gap year program, there are tensions that I just have to embrace, like conversations that come up where somebody's done something stupid and you're like, oh, for goodness sake, and then you're like, no, wait, this is part of the journey.
Yeah.
This is what it's all about. You know, two of them have fallen out over, you know, a romantic relationship, and you're like, oh, just, you know, I need to write my message for Sunday, but actually it's like, hey, this is leadership development. Because I was like that when I was 18, and you know, I think though embracing those frustrations and bumps in the road and mistakes, because we've all made them.
Yeah.
And actually the times where we learn the most sometimes is when we make a mistake and we're given, you know, specific feedback. Hey, this wouldn't have happened if you'd have thought about that, if you'd have slowed down there, if you'd asked this question. And I think, it's really good. It's good to create environments where people feel like they can.
I love what your illustration there, because Amanda and I have really enjoyed recently watching The Chosen online, you know, the new kind of adaptation of A Life of Jesus. And I love anything that represents Jesus with this group of disciples wandering along the road and almost getting between a couple of them because they're bickering or whatever. And just been reading through Mark's Gospel, and it's kind of captured my imagination. What was it like for Jesus sometimes maybe just to come alongside one of the disciples and whisper something in their ear that the others didn't. I was at my quiet time the other morning, and particularly little text I've got for the MIT conference online, and I got thinking about what things aren't recorded in the Gospels that Jesus said to disciples that they never ever forgot, that took their journey just along, because John says not everything is contained here. So I think that whole thing of sometimes just the dealing in the nitty-gritty, again, there's nobody that develops leaders like Jesus. You know, 12 apostles and all the men and women that were around that scene with Jesus that were there on that day of Pentecost. So that's a really helpful point.
Hello everyone, my name is Sam Collinson. I am an Elim minister in training, preparing for ordination in 2022. And in January 2021, this year, I became the lead pastor of one church here in Norwich. I want to briefly tell you my journey of leadership development and hope that it encourages you whatever stage that you're at. In 2018, I had my MIT interview and I was stationed here in Norwich. The church was being run by Dominic and Catherine D'Souza. It was great what God was doing with the church. I've been visiting from Cambridge, where I was living at the time. My wife and I, we graduated Regent's Theological College in 2013, and in that in-between time, between 2013 and 2018, God had been preparing me in the secular workplace. I've been serving in the local church, and we'd been growing our young family. And so when we moved, it was really exciting. But it was a bit of a shock to us when a prophecy came in our church that God was going to shift and change everything about our church very soon. I believe it was only the very next week that Dominic and Catherine announced to myself and the other leaders that they were soon moving on to lead Cardiff City Church. And so after a brief period of handover, our church was then run by an interim leadership team and a team of elders, including myself as an MIT. And I essentially functioned as assistant pastor, but also with responsibilities in admin and finance. And I was going through my MIT. I was having supervision locally, nationally. A lot of it was online because of COVID, but it was great because everything that I was learning was directly feeding into everything that I was called to do in that church. And in that time, God spoke to the lead elder at the time and said it was time for the baton of leadership to be passed on to me. And it was great that the church was so supportive. It was great what God did with our church, and it was great to see how our church transitioned really to this point, seeing lots of new people coming in, and we have a vision to reach our city. And I feel equipped and I feel ready for the task ahead. And what I love about the MIT journey is that it has such a missional focus and is geared towards equipping leaders to be missional. And so I just want to encourage you, whatever stage that you're at, the key is always to be willing and obedient, to be listening to the voice of the Holy Spirit, and to be following his guidance in everything that we do. Thank you for listening today. May God bless you during this conference.
Now, I've done really well to go through almost all our conversation and not talk about the Elim ministry, because it's a passion of mine and it's what I do. And of course, Andy, you're close to getting to interview, so bribes are allowed. As long as Duncan verifies them, we're going to land that. And Shireen's been through it all, and she's come through, and she's very sane as a result of it. But Shireen, it may be that there's some folks who are listening in who themselves are feeling a real strong pull towards Christian ministry, to the Elim ministry, or some of our pastors who are helping folks. What would you say to someone? You've been on that journey. You're one of our great MITs. All our MITs are great, so you're one of them, therefore. But do you notice how I dug myself out of that hole?
That was
One
great.
of MITs. One of the great ones.
That was wisdom. Can you tell me how you did that?
I can't. I'll give you a bit of a lesson later. What would you say to folks in that kind of journey, really?
Yeah, I would say ask. So ask God, talk to God about that, because he will inevitably direct your path, and be prepared to listen for the answer. And to ask people around you who you trust to be honest with you. If you're saying it to people and they're going, then it's probably not a good indication. But if you say to some people that you trust that that's what you sense, and they're like, yeah, I see that in you, or go for it, that's often a good indication as well. And I think it's also important to be really informed about what the ministry and the mission of the church looks like, what the challenges and responsibilities of church leadership, whether it be, at the forefront or behind the scenes, to have a really good picture about what that looks like, because it's not that glamorous for most of us. It really isn't. So it's really important to be really informed and then start taking steps. I think if you've done those 3 steps, it's a good time to then maybe push the door and explore that a little bit more.
That's brilliant. That's really, really good. Kind of the final thought I had really as I was thinking about chatting to you folks today is that we are, in the first instance, all the fruit of somebody else's intentional concern for us. And I've been reflecting in preparation for our chat today about my own journey, and I am the fruit of other people. But we also carry seeds, don't we, that in our responsibilities for other people. And so I want to thank you guys for what you are and what you bring to your churches, but to our movement in so many different ways, and for the commitment you show. And let's just hope and pray that everybody who's listening in and watching us today has been inspired by what you've said, and can continue that journey and think about how we develop leaders, because really today we're sowing some seeds maybe that hopefully we'll see the fruit of in years to come. Thanks ever so much for being part of today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bless you. This conversation we've had today could actually take place in any and every Elim church. What I'm hoping you've discovered from today is the dramatic impact of simply identifying somebody who has the heart and the desire to grow as a disciple of Jesus, and to become somebody who influences others on their own journey. All of us who've taken part in this conversation started somewhere with a leader who encouraged us and supported us, and I'm sure that's true for so many of you listening today. John Maxwell, who's a great teacher on leadership development, said, "A leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, and then shows the way." And maybe one of the takeaways for you today is to ask yourself, not how do I develop leadership, but when do I start developing leadership? It can start as simply as identifying one person who you can encourage to believe that God could use them to influence others in greater ways for the kingdom. Simple steps, like encouraging them in their devotional life, suggesting some great books about leadership, or giving them more opportunities to serve and to lead. As part of ELS 21, we're recommending some great books for each of the seminar themes. And I'd encourage you to look into these titles and either begin to stretch your thinking about leadership development, or for those of you who are already intentionally engaging in growing leaders, the challenge becomes to keep learning how we can effectively discover, develop, and deploy new generations of transformational leaders. God bless you.